Welcome to our second lesson, that is Standard 6 Science Unit 3, and our topic today is going to be on plants. We're going to put our focus on growth and reproduction in plants. Growth and reproduction in plants. In the previous class, that is Standard 5, we had looked at the main characteristics of living things, and we see that growth and reproduction are among the characteristics of all living things. So, what is reproduction? What is reproduction? What is reproduction? Reproduction is the process by which living things give rise to young ones. Reproduction is the process by which living things give rise to young ones of the same kind to the parents. And we know that when living things give rise to tiny to small young ones, these young ones mature into adulthood. That's why we are saying that our topic today is going to be on growth and reproduction in plants. Growth and reproduction in plants. So, in plants, the main reproductive part of the plant is the flower. In plants, the main reproductive part is the flower. We can also say that the flower is the reproductive part of a plant. The flower is the reproductive part of a plant. The flower has male and female parts. The flower has male and female parts. Some of the flowers have the male and the female reproductive parts in the same flower. And in a few cases, some of the flowers do not contain both the female and the male reproductive parts in the same flower. So in this case, we're going to look at the main reproductive part of the plant, which is the flower. If I can do a sketch of a flower diagram of a flower. Let's do a simple one. Like that. I'm going to name the different parts of the flower, but in this next lesson, I would like that you come with a flower of any type. Then we can do our practicals in the next lesson. So this is the sketch of a flower. We have said that a flower has the male and the female parts, but not all of them. That has the female and the male parts in the same flower. A few have the male and the female parts in different flowers. So we're going to use mental science Standard 6 and primary science Standard 6. In our mental science book 6, it's in page 20. And in primary science, it is in page 18. Primary science, page 18. Mental science, page 20. So let's name the parts of the flower we have here. These are the petals. These are the anthers. We have the filament. we have the sepals, we have the stigma, that's the stigma, we have, this is the style, we have the ovary, this that is round like this, that is our ovary, that's the ovary. And then there are some things which are found inside the ovary which are called the ovules. The ovules, and this is our flower stalk. Flower stalk. We have said that in most plants the male and the female parts are found in the same flower. So we're going to look at the male parts of a flower. The male parts of a flower. The male parts of a flower are collectively known as the stamen. The male parts of a flower are collectively, that is together, we call them the stamen. Say the male parts. And we have, collectively we call them the stamen. What are these parts? The stamen is made up of anthers and the filaments. The stamen is made up of the anthers and the filament. There are only two, the anthers and the filament. What about the female parts? What about the female parts? Female parts of a flower. We have the stigma, we have the style, we have the ovary and the ovules. We have the stigma, which is here, the style, the ovary and the ovules. Those are the female parts of a flower. Those are the female parts of a flower. In the male parts of a flower, the anthers produce the pollen grains. The anthers here, they produce the pollen grains. They are powder-like. The pollen grains are powder-like, and they are the male sex cells of a flower. They are the male sex cells of a flower. We have heard that the anthers produce pollen grains. Pollen grains, and the pollen grains are the male sex cells of a flower or a plant. What are the female sex cells of a flower? The female sex cells of a flower. The female sex cells of a flower, the female sex cells of a flower are the ovules. Sex cells are the ovules, which are found inside the ovary. The ovules are found inside the ovary. So we have learned that the anthers produce the pollen grains, which are the male sex cells. What about the filament, which we have said it's also the male part of a flower? The filament holds the anthers in position. The filament holds the anthers in position. What about the female parts of a flower? The female parts of a flower are collectively known as the pistil. The female parts of a flower collectively are called the pistil. Remember, we have said that the male parts of a flower together, they are called the stamen. The female parts of a flower together, that is collectively, they are known as the pistil. They are known as the pistil. So we have the female parts of a flower comprises of the stigma, the style, the ovary, and the ovules. Let's have a look at the different functions of the different parts of the female parts of a flower. Let's look at the different functions of the female parts of a flower. We have said therefore, we have the stigma, we have the style, we have the ovary, and the ovules. Let me just make a sketch of the same. We have it here. We have said therefore, we have the ovules inside here, we have the stigma, we have the style, we have the ovary and the ovules, which are found inside the ovary. This is female parts. The female parts of a flower. So we have the stigma. The stigma receives pollen grains. The stigma receives pollen grains, and we have said that the pollen grains are the male sex cells. The pollen grains are the male sex cells. So the work of the stigma is to receive. The stigma receives pollen grains from the anthers. The stigma receives pollen grains from the anthers and allows them to germinate, forming the pollen tube. They germinate. They get into the pollen grains, get into the stigma. They germinate here to form the pollen tube. What about the style? What about the style? We have said it receives, the stigma receives pollen grains. And what about the style? The style holds the stigma in place. The style holds the stigma in place. It also links the stigma to the ovary. This is the style. It holds the stigma in position, the style, and it links the stigma to the ovary. It links the stigma, it joins the stigma to the ovary. Stigma to the ovary. What about the ovary? What is the function of the ovary? It contains the female sex cells known as the ovules. The ovary holds or contains the ovules, which are the female sex cells. The female sex cells. What is the function of the ovules? The ovules are the female sex cells. The ovules contain the female sex cells. After fertilization, they grow to form seeds. The ovules grow to form seeds. The ovules which are inside the ovary, after germination, they grow to form seeds. Let's have a look at the how the flower now germinates. It's going to take us to our subtopic, which is called pollination. But before we go to that, I know most of you are asking about the other parts of the flower. There are some of the parts of a flower. There are some parts of the flower which are neither male nor female. What do I mean by saying this? These parts are not male and they are not female. Some of these parts are the petals. We have the petals, the flower stalk, we have the sepals, the petals, and the nectary part, What are the functions of these parts? Because they are neither male nor female. Let's have a look at the petals. They are brightly colored. Leafy-like parts of a flower. They mainly attract insects. We have the flower here. If I can do it very fast, like this. We have named these parts. These are the petals. They are brightly colored. They attract insects, which help in the process we are going to look at, which is pollination. And what about the sepals? Here we have heard that they are not male and they are not female. The sepals, what's their work now? The sepals, these are the green parts of a flower found at the base of the petals on the outside of the flower. They usually protect the flower by enclosing the delicate parts when the flower is still at the young stage, which we call the bud stage. They protect this young flower. They protect the inner parts. Those are the sepals. Because of their green color, they help in the process of photosynthesis. The sepals, they help in the process of photosynthesis at the tender age of the flower, photosynthesis. And we know that photosynthesis is the process by which green plants make their own food. That is the function of the sepals. Now, what about the flower stalk? The flower stalk is here. Flower stalk. What is the function of the flower stalk? It is the part that attaches the flower to the plant. It holds the flower in position. It holds the flower into position. It attaches itself to the either to the branches or to the stem. So we have the nectary part, that is the last part, which is neither male nor female. The nectary produces a sweet tasting liquid known as nectar. The nectary part, as it suggests, produces a sweet liquid which is known as nectar. You have ever seen butterflies, bees, or birds near flowers. They like going near flowers. What do they go to do there? They go maybe to suck the nectar. And we're going to see that most of these birds and butterflies and some of the insects help in pollination, which is going to be our next subtopic. Let me just introduce you to the subtopic of our next lesson, which is going to be pollination. Pollination. What is pollination? Pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anthers to the stigma. Pollination is the transfer of pollen grains, which are the male sex cells, from the anthers to the stigma. The anthers are the male parts, as we have seen, and the stigma is the female part of the flower. So we have these grains here, the sex cells, the male sex cells. They are being transferred into the female part of the flower, and now we're going to look more on this in our next lesson, and I'll advise that in our next lesson we are going to come with a flower of any type and a razor blade so that we can do our practicals. Kindly, that is the end of our lesson for today. So I'd like you to follow me on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is Progress TV 2020. Progress TV channel 2020, and that is my WhatsApp for any questions. For any questions, concerns, comments, kindly WhatsApp me in 0741 934101. You can email me at progress TV 2020 at gmail.com. And you can also follow me on Facebook at that is FB at Marucha Kanana. Kindly subscribe, comment, view, and like, and invite your friends as we continue with our syllabus. Stay safe as we keep going on with our syllabus. Thank you very much for listening. See you next time, same time. Thank you.